You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks and Zach Bechtold. We hope you enjoy this week's show, and you can find out more about us by going online at beardedtheologians.com, where you can pick up a few t-shirts, listen to a few old episodes, and find ways that you can connect with us. Thank you for listening. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast hosted by Matt Franks
and Zach Bechtold.
So we're bringing the series on the Sermon on the Plain to a close. And as we bring this to a close, we're going to end looking at the last part of Luke chapter 6. And so, Zach, do your thing with what you always do every time.
Yeah, just read the scripture. That's all you guys say.
I just like saying the other thing.
I know you do. I know you do. So we're gonna take a look at Luke 6 Luke chapter 6 verses 39 through 49. Jesus also told them a riddle. A blind man can't lead another blind person, right? Won't they both fall in a ditch? Disciples aren't greater than their teacher, but whoever is fully prepared will be like their teacher. Why do you see a splinter in your brother or sister's eye, but don't notice the log in your own? How can you say to your brother or sister, brother, sister, let me take the splinter out of your eye when you don't see the log in your own eye? You deceive yourselves. First, take the log out of your eye, and then you will see clearly to take the splinter out of your brother or sister's eye. A good tree doesn't produce bad fruit, nor does a bad tree produce good fruit. Each tree is known by its own fruit. People don't gather figs from thorny plants, nor do they pick grapes from prickly bushes. A good person produces good from the good treasury of their inner self, while an evil person produces evil from the evil treasury of their inner self. The inner self overflows with words that are spoken. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? I'll show what it's like when someone comes to me, hears my words, and puts them into practice. It's like a person building a house by digging deep and laying the foundation on bedrock. When the flood comes, the rising water smashed against the house, but the water couldn't shake the house because it was well built. But those who don't put into practice what they hear are like the person who built a house without a foundation. The flood water smashes against it, and it collapsed instantly. It was completely destroyed. And so, Matt, as you hear those three different, it starts out, the Common English Bible uses the word riddles. Maybe they're parables, maybe they're riddles, maybe they're stories. But as you hear these three bits of wisdom from Jesus, what catches your attention?
There were two, it was interesting because this would be another hard one to preach this week with all that's going on.
This is three different sermons, right? This is the sermon series just in this section.
Here's your 3 bullet points each week. I mean, if you were preaching this text. But I think there's 2 things that really stuck out to me. 1 verse 40, disciples aren't greater than the teacher, but whoever is fully prepared will be like the teacher. Our goal in the church really should be help to people to be prepared to be like Jesus.
Yeah.
And if we're doing that well, you'll see that in their everyday lives. And and then he goes on to really, how do you care for your community? Being self-aware, and how do you handle that? Your self-awareness is important because it's easy to say one thing and say that you're going to do this or be like this, and then you're going to do another thing. I mean, we're seeing that right now, and what's going on around the world. The other is and I'll jump to, yeah.
What's going on around the world, Matt?
Depends on who you read and who you look at.
Fair. We're reading Jesus today.
Yes, we're back in. Let me jump back into Jesus. The other is in 46. So this ties into the same thing in 46. If I were preaching this is what I would say, or how I would probably look at this, because this is what's speaking to me, anyways. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? I'll show you what it's like when someone comes to me, hears my words, and puts them into practice. I love that. and you and I know, like, just from experience and even what we're seeing now, um when a church says they're being like Jesus and then they're not being like Jesus, that's one of the harshest things you can do
Hmm.
in creating religious trauma or even like just the harm that could be caused.
Hmm.
Um, the struggle with that is um, it's easy to look at everybody else and judge them, and even if you jump back to next last week's scripture, the idea is not to judge, and it's really looking at ourselves and like how can we be more like Jesus, like and I think that that's where understanding and being honest is key. And the other is, and I saw this in a post a while back saying we need to normalize saying it's okay that, or just say that I don't know.
Hmm.
And I think with our walk with Jesus, the real struggle is like sometimes there are things that we don't know. And I'm really clear. Like when people say, "Well, do you know this scripture?" I'm like, "No, I don't." That's just not something that my brain can wrap around. Like I have
Right.
like I have my reasoning, like or hey, what does the scripture say? A lot of times I'm not going to jump into it until like, hey, can I look at this? Let me look at it.
Hmm.
Let me do some work on it, because I
Hmm.
want to do the work on it.
Right.
The latter is like I think to just when we want to be like Jesus, it's to be like Jesus, not to be Jesus. And I think the two are different. And I think that that's
Yes.
where sometimes we get into trouble, or we can fall in the trap of judging one another
Mhm.
because we say, well, they're not being Jesus. Well, it's not being, we're not to be Jesus. We are to be like Jesus. And that to me takes preparation. And I love how it talks about the bad fruit doesn't produce good fruit kind of deal. Like
Mhm.
there's a lot here. You could talk about discipleship here, and you know how we feel about a discipleship, that we don't stick it in the corner of the church.
That's right. We don't put in the corner. Well, yeah, and I the Common English has the heading on this as avoiding self-deception, and I like that because as you read through these, it's very that inner work of where are we, and are we do we have a foundation? Are we settled in who we are and doing the work to make sure uh, that that we're doing good and that we don't have a log in our eye while we critique the people around us, right? Um, it- I read this and it just screams Wesleyan theology, right? Like it screams that inner work and accountability in ourselves and in community, but also putting our faith into action. Trees don't just grow fruit to have fruit on them, right? They serve a purpose. We don't consider ourselves good people just to hold that to ourselves, right? Like we put that to work. Um, and then yeah, you're right, that foundation piece of just who are we? What are we doing? And are we actually leaning on the foundations and teachings of Christ? Or are we just calling out Lord, Lord, because it's comfortable or we're hopeful that it will save us from something bad? Um, and I love that Jesus just speaks so clearly to who we are as people, uh, and it doesn't feel like we've changed all that much since
Yeah.
Jesus said this, right? We're still judging the crap out of people and critiquing every little bitty thing that they do without taking an inner look at ourselves and what we're doing, right? We're not putting our good fruit to use all the time. We're just letting it grow and die and slough off. And foundations, you're right. There's a lot going on in the world that are saying foundations and build upon this, and yet their actions are speaking a whole lot louder than their words. So, yeah, I do. I think this is three different sermons. Like there's a whole sermon series right here to pull it out. Who are we? What are our foundations, and how are we living that out in a way that does good in the world and takes care of our siblings around us?
I think it definitely speaks true to the nature of the Gospel of Luke,
Hmm.
and that foundational work of the Magnificat, Luke 4, and here in Luke 6. Like this is a whole realize like we're still in the we haven't come down the mountain. That's the next chapter. So we're still in the space, or sorry, we haven't come out of the plane yet. We're still in the plane, hanging out with everybody. and to realize too, I think what's key here is that we have to also recognize that in this story, like so in this larger chapter, it's like if we look at the larger chapter here, we have to
Mhm.
remember that the people that came were listening to this had just been healed, had just been cared for.
Yeah,
And so there's this way of saying, hey, you have received this. Now, like understand it's not about you. And to like grow from this experience to, you know,
it's a very now what statement
yeah,
from
yeah.
Jesus, right? Like we don't always get that. When Jesus tells parables, the disciples sometimes have to come back and be like, what was that? Can you tell me what that means? You're right. We see this in the Sermon on the Plain. You get that build. Jesus gives you the now what? Now that you've been healed, now that you've heard these things, now that you've witnessed it, go live it. Like go do something with it. Um, it's not good enough just to sit on it and just not do anything, right? Like that's a great point.
And so and I think like as we bring this to a close, like I like when the on the mountain gets way more press than the Sermon on the Plain.
It does.
They're both unique for their communities in which they're speaking to, and to me, that's the important thing to understand. There's a reason why, and Matt Rawls' book like looks at this in the last days, and like the different stories and why they're important to us today. It's the same thing with this: is that the Sermon on the Plain is not worse than the Sermon on the Mount, and vice versa, but yet the nuggets of truth and really it's about how we care for ourselves and how we care for others and how we love God. I mean, does
Mhm.
that not sound familiar in a lot of ways? And I think that
Mhm.
as we bring this to a close, like I'm not like this is definitely challenging. Chapter 6, Luke chapter 6 is really hard, especially in practice, but so is Luke 4 and Luke 1 as well.
Yeah, I love it. Let's put it to work.
Yeah. So Zach, where have you seen God at work in your life this week?
Um, I don't even I don't know. Um, I know it's there. I know God's been at work. I'm really tired. Um, I'm pretty emotionally and spiritually drained today. Uh, and so I'm gonna lean into the I don't know yet. But it's there. I'll figure it out.
Um, I don't know. Like I've been wrestling with that question all this morning as I knew we were going to record. I was like, I gotta have something. I gotta say something. And we talk about how it's okay not to say something. And one of the things that I've seen God at work is there is a spirit of renewal happening around that I feel in different spaces that I've been in the last few days. And that's exciting, but also scary because renewal also means change. Like we don't renew and go back to the same. But I'm excited for it. I'm excited for what is to come. There's a sense of the future that's kind of exciting, and I'm intrigued by it and seeing where God leads me, and then leads the congregation that I lead, and all the things. So yeah,
Mhm. I like it.
listeners, we are thankful for you. You can go on our website at beardedtheologians.com and check out all of our past episodes and all of the things. Don't be afraid to pick up an item or two. Get a don't put discipleship in the corner sticker. It's a good sticker. We definitely are grateful for you. And so don't be afraid to like or share us throughout your spaces. And so for the Bearded Theologians, I'm Matt Franks.
I'm Zach Bechtold. Thanks for checking us out.
Someday you need to do a bat flip.
All I have is wooden bats in my office. It would not go well.
I want you to subscribe and like this video and push that thumbs up.
Thank you for listening to the Bearded Theologians podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share on all social media outlets. You can check out old episodes and more information at beardedtheologians.com. Thanks for checking us out.